Right, so my friend Jenny Parsons, a Twitter pal, has asked me to talk about extraction because she is very excitingly going to be doing her first extraction. So I'm not really going to talk so much about what I do, but about what you need. And of course, in many ways, the thing you need more than almost anything else to really get your honey out is an extractor. This, you put the frames in here and it spins very fast. This is a 20 frame electric extractor. However, you can get 4 framed hand extractors. A lot of the clubs can lend you extractors because they are an expensive bit of kit, about £1,000 for one like this, and even small ones go into, a couple of hundred. Stainless steel, don't be tempted by the old ones which are not stainless, because you can't sell your honey unless you're using stainless steel. You can see this is a mess because I am in the middle of extracting at the moment. A couple of buckets of water and it'll be pristine when I finish. So an extractor of some description. If you haven't got an extractor, you've either got to eat all your honey as honeycomb, or you could press it out. But that doesn't bear thinking about. So if you can borrow an extractor, that's your number one thing. So, something to mention with an extractor, whether it's a big one, they come much bigger than this, twice the size or more. You've got to balance it. Those of us who are old enough to remember the spin dryers, this is effectively a spin dryer. So every frame will have a different weight of honey in it. Some frames may have some crystallised honey. You've got to be thinking all the time, where am I going to put this frame, because it needs to be opposite a frame that's similar. So if I've got a bit of crystallisation, I'll put one here and one there so that they're balancing each other. If you haven't got the full amount, you spread them out so they're balancing each other. If you don't balance it, it won't get up to speed. And if you can't get it up to speed, it won't work. You won't get the honey out. This one is bolted to the floor. That does help. But if you're extracting in your kitchen, you're not going to be bolting your extractor to the floor. So it becomes even more important then to balance your extractor. Floor's important. You want something. This one's incredibly sticky because I'm in the middle of extracting. But if you haven't got a good washable floor, you need to put down plastic, tarpaulin, something. Otherwise you are going to get in a dreadful state, because believe you me, it gets everywhere. You're going to get wax, which is quite easy to get up. You're going to get propolis, which is not as easy to get up. But more than anything else, you're going to get honey everywhere. So sticky. Then the basic equipment that you need. Well, I use a little knife sharpener all the time, just because I don't want my knife to be razor sharp, but I do want the knife to be sharp so it can cut through easily. I find this is useful for getting the filters clean, getting stuff out, so it's a useful little thing that I want to keep close to. This is an essential piece of kit, a hive tool. A, because you've got to get the frames out of the supers, and B, because again this is a very useful tool for scraping filters when they start to clog, and they do start to clog. This is a bucket rest, one of those things that when you first start beekeeping you look at it and wonder what the heck it is. Invaluable for putting on the top of your tank. So it's another piece of kit that is worth having, both for extracting and then also for bottling. It doesn't have to be stainless steel, it can be edible grade plastic, but stainless is excellent. And this is a very, very old one, predates Thorns, I believe. Comes with this nice neat little filter on the top. well, somewhere lurking in here, there's another piece of filter that goes in here, a coarser one. The thought being is that that picks up the bigger bits and then that runs through. But in actual fact, you find that this clogs and then you can't get at it because you've got the other one on the top. So I never use the top filter. I just use this filter. And what clogs it isn't wax, it's crystals in the sugar. So every so often you have to get in there with your hive tool, scrape the holes to let a bit more through. And this is where your bucket rest comes in, because it, sorry, cat-handed as always. So that sits like that, up there. Oh. And that's where, when you've got your buckets, you need 2 or 3 food grade buckets. I'll just tip the water out. I want to get it into my tank. And that supports a bucket so that you've spun it out of the spinner. It's gone into the bucket, and now you're filtering it. I would only be doing half a bucket at a time, obviously, because otherwise it'll go everywhere. So that's something else you need, is 2 or 3 nice buckets to go underneath the extractor and underneath this. It's handy to store in buckets if you've got more than a little bit of honey. Obviously, if you've only got a small amount, you're probably going to store it in jars. Remember that this initial stage is only a partial filtration. Before you jar it, you will either leave it to settle. It's called a settling tank, so it settles, and then you'll skim the top off, or you decant it into another settling tank through a finer filter. Don't worry, you're not going to take the pollen out. It's a bit of a myth. Is it filtered? Well, if it wasn't, it'd be full of all sorts of bits and pieces. So you're going to have to filter to some extent. But it's that some foreign countries, they filter it through bentonite, which is a clay mineral, and that obviously takes everything out. You don't want to be doing that. But pollen is minuscule, so the level of filtration you're going to do through a cone filter won't take out your pollen. So you need something to settle it in. Could be a bucket, and if you're going to go for a stainless settling tank, if you can get one that's tall and thin like this one, it is better, because inevitably when you're jarring you get a bit of froth on the top. But if it's tall and thin, it's a small area of froth and you will get more into your jars without getting the frothy bits. It's difficult to get them. Most of them nowadays are short and fat, like that one. And if you go for a 25 kilo, it's exactly the same but half as tall. So it has the same, also takes up more room. If I could get another one like that one, I would. Now then, you've got to cut the wax off of your frame. I've put a frame here so that you can see it. So here's your frame. You're going to use your knife and you're going to cut a thin section of that wax off. You just want to expose the honey. As you haven't got any sophisticated equipment, you want to take off as little as possible, but you do want to get off every single solitary bit of wax. Apart from anything else, it will unbalance the machine if you don't. I particularly like these. I've used all sorts of knives. I like these long, thin, bendy knives. You can get into nooks and crannies. You can bow it a bit if you need to cut in beneath the level of the frame. I'll try and demonstrate that on a different video. You can get, this isn't an uncapping table. It's actually a bit out of our wax press, but you can get them, plastic ones, a bit bigger than this, wide enough for this bit of wood to go on. We had one initially, so you would uncap onto that and the wax can sit there and it will drip. and then you can get the there's a tap at this end, so what drips through you can get out. Well, it's better than not doing anything, obviously, but it won't get a lot. You will still end up with very sticky cappings at the end of it. And what a lot of people do is give them back to the bees, which if you've only got the one apiary, you can do that with no fear of introducing disease. It's not a bad idea, really. I picked up one of these filters in Aldi's or Lidl's, one of the two, and it's proved to be very helpful because it will fit on a multitude of other things. So I can pop this on top of another filter, and it takes the worst of the big bits out before it goes down through a slightly finer filter. Here's an example of one of our plastic settling tanks, which if I just tipped it in, it would very quickly block because that is quite fine. But if I stick the metal filter on the rim just over the top, which has got big holes in it, it'll still block because the crystals go through, as I mentioned with the other one. So this makes an enormous difference because I can still access the bottom filter to give it a scrape, but I can pour it through there. So it's little things like that make a difference. Something I've forgotten to say, which is wildly important, is temperature. Honey will not flow freely if it's cold. You should keep it warm from the minute you get it home. So ours goes into a heated room, not wildly heated because it would be expensive, and then this room is also got a radiator in it to keep it warm. So this is, they call them, it gets called nappy melter, but that's actually a brand. So this isn't an nappy melter per se, but it's the same thing. So this is a posh uncapping table, which the temperature I've just showed you is just the temperature of the room. So we've got a frame here that we can put the frame on, which makes uncapping easier. Similar to doing it on the table over there. And then the cappings would fall into the bottom here, gradually build up as I'm going on. And then this, because I could heat it from underneath to make the honey flow out of those cappings easier, comes out underneath, and also it's got a lid which again you can heat. We've now changed to using a wax press, so this is now just a large table for taking the cappings off. However, they've got it was certainly an improvement on what we had before, and it's certainly an improvement on an old-fashioned heated uncapping one with a water bath, which you had no control over the temperature. The water would get very hot. It certainly got the honey out the cappings, but that's modern beekeeping. We just do not want things to get that hot. So hopefully that's given you an idea. We need somewhere to uncap, something to uncap into. We need the tools to uncap with the knife. It needs to be a sensibly sharp knife. It doesn't have to be like a razor blade, but it needs to be a sensibly sharp knife. I wouldn't want to use anything too sharp because I'd probably stab myself. We need the spinner so that we can get the honey out, and we need something to take the honey from the spinner, and we need something to settle the honey into, and we need to do it all in a warm room where nobody's going to have a fit with their leg in the air when they discover that everything is covered in honey. You need to be able to wash your hands a lot as well. I wash my hands probably every 20 minutes. The advantage is that honey and wax is a wonderful hand moisturiser, and my hands are never softer, hands and arms are never softer than when I'm extracting. So I hope it's not been a practical demonstration, but I hope it's given you an idea of what you need to get started on your own extraction, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do.